Hello, welcome to the video notes for lesson 3-1. This is the first lesson for topic 3, integer exponents, and it begins on page 1 in your notes packet. Alright, let's take a look at this lesson. The title, Perfect Squares, Square Roots, and Equations of the Form x squared equals p. So, some of those terms should be very familiar to you, perfect squares and square roots. Let's take a look at the learning targets. The first one, I can evaluate square roots. And then the second one is, I can solve equations of the form x squared equals p. Alright, so first thing, we have a table that talks about perfect squares. So perfect square is a number that is the square of an integer. A number that is the square of an integer is a perfect square. So what we're going to do is perfect squares are basically numbers that come from a number multiplied by itself. So if you think of a square, we find the area by multiplying two of the sides together, and let me draw a square. And if with a square, since we know all the sides are the same, if we multiply the two sides together, we get the area. Also think about the units when we have area. So inches. So if I do inches times inches, I get inches squared. Alright, so that's why a lot of these terms and the things that we're going to be doing should make a lot of sense to you. Alright, so we're going to finish filling in this table. We'll start with the first one, 1. The top row is n, the bottom row is n squared. So I'm going to do n to the second power, or 1 to the second power, which is 1. 2 to the second power, which is 4. 3 to the second power, which is 9. And yes, you need to copy all this down, and hopefully you are listening like you're supposed to be. 4 to the second power, which is 16. 5 to the second power, which is 25. 36. 49. 64. 81. And then 100. Alright, so it was starting to get to be the same thing over and over again, so I didn't want to keep writing the number squared underneath. But you get the idea. Now, in math, we'll be using some flashcards to talk about and to see how well you know and understand perfect squares and practice them, because this unit will be a lot easier if you know your perfect squares. Alright, now it's time to talk about square roots. Square root, the square root of a number is another number that when multiplied by itself is equal to the original number. Alright, so for example, let's take the number 4. If I find the square root of it, what I need to find is, and some of you might be saying, oh, that's divide. No, it is not divide. So let's put a little star over here. Not divide. Now you might divide to figure it out, but we're not dividing the number in half. Alright, we're trying to find two numbers that equal the number. Now 4 does just happen to divide in half, because what times itself gives you 4? The answer is 2. Let's do another one. Square root of 36. What times itself is 36? 6. Let's do another one. This time, let's put a negative in front of the square root. Okay. Now, what times itself gives you 49? That'll be 7. Now, the negative was on the outside, so we bring it along. Negative 7. Just think about what we did to get these think of 2 times 2 is going to give you 4. So that's the relationship here. Okay? 6 times 6 equals 36. That's what we're looking for here. Alright, now I'm going to give you one more. Plus or minus, positive or negative, the square root of 100. Now, that is going to be plus or minus, in other words, the positive answer or the negative answer of 100. Now, there's two ways to get 100. You can do 10 times 10 or negative 10 times negative 10. That's why we think of positive, negative, or plus, minus. Alright? Now, most of this unit you will not be allowed to use a calculator. So I want to also talk about when you use square root on a calculator, you'll get just the positive answer. But you need to understand that a negative times a negative will give you a positive as well. Alright, we'll talk more about that later. Okay, what is the relationship between squares and square roots? Pretty simple. Squaring a number and taking a square root are inverse operations, or opposite operations. Okay? So they are opposites of each other. Okay, so 4 squared is equal to 16. What is the inverse of that? The square root of 16 is equal to 4. 5 squared is equal to 25. Square root of 25 is equal to 5. These are inverses of each other. So a general statement about this, so x squared, so if I take a number and multiply itself by itself, I'm going to get a number. And if I take the square root of that number, of that answer, I'm going to get back to the original number, or x. So these are inverses, or opposites. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at page 2. Alright, evaluate. So we are going to start figuring some of these out. If you think you know some of them, you can pause the video and try it, and then hit play to see if you got it right. First one should be pretty obvious. That one's 5. Second one, we've got a negative in front of the 100. You should know that one. That's negative 10. I'm going to let you try this one on your own. Keep in mind what's in front of the square root of 144. Let's jump down to the next row. Alright, so I've got negative 3 times. Now, you might be saying there's no time sign. Just like with parentheses, when there's nothing in between these, or I'm sorry, like with a variable, there's nothing in between, you're going to multiply. So I have negative 3 times, so if you want to put a dot, the square root of 16. Well, that's the same as negative 3 times 4, and negative 3 times 4 is negative 12. Oh, just as another side note, put a star up at the top. You are going to treat, not get a treat, square root, same as an exponent in order of operations. And that's going to be important for the second thing we're going to be doing on this page, on page 2. Alright, so back to what we were doing. Square root of 4 over 81. Square root of 4 is 2. Now, there is no square root over 81, so it is not 2 over 9, it's 2 over 81. Same thing. I'm going to have you try this last one on your own. Not as hard as it looks. See if you can find the answer. Let's move on down to what's below. Now, we are going to be solving equations. And so because these are equations, because we're finding a variable, we are basically going to be finding the positive and negative answer for these square roots. Now, when you solve equations, you basically are going backwards in order of operation. So, square root happens last. That was terrible. Square root is last. Alright, so first thing I'm going to do here is I've got negative 2m squared equals negative 8. I'm going to divide both sides by negative 2. So m squared equals, so negative 8 divided by negative 2 is 4. Now to find m, I've got to undo this squared. Remember, the inverse of squaring something is the square root. Let's use a different color for this. So square root of m squared, square root of 4. M equals, now I know some of you might be saying it equals 2, but it's actually positive or negative 2. Because remember, negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. Okay, the next one, this time we have x squared over 5 equals 405. So my first step is I'm going to multiply the whole thing, or both sides of the equation, by 5. And I'll get x squared equals 2025. Now I need to take the square root to undo the x squared. Oh, by the way, I should draw a train track because we are solving an equation. And x equals, so if you take the square root of 2025 on a calculator, you'll get 45. But because it can be a positive or a negative number, we need to put plus minus. So there is the answer for that one. Next, negative t squared equals negative 49. Alright, so I want to get rid of that negative, so divide both sides by negative 1. So I get t squared equals 49. So divide both sides. Oops, that's supposed to be a 49. Or not divide, take the square root of both sides, and you get t equals plus or minus 7. Boy, I really messed that whole problem up, didn't I? That is not a mistake. It's just very, very sloppy. But I know some of you are going to disagree. Alright, next one I'm going to let you try on your own. I think you can handle this one. I'll give you a hint. Try adding 5 to both sides. Okay, next one. So we'll drop down. A squared equals 64 over 81. When you take the square root of a fraction. Now, in the problem up above, earlier we had a square root just in the numerator. But when you're solving an equation and you take a square root of a fraction, it sometimes will look like this. But really what that means is the square root of the whole thing, which is the top and the bottom. So, when I take the square root of the top and the bottom, I'll get A equals, now, again, it's plus or minus. Square root of 64 is 8. Square root of 81 is 9. And there is your answer, 8 over 9. Or negative 8 over 9. Okay, so this one. Watch what happens here. I'm going to do this the hard way. Some of you might have an idea of how to do this. We could divide both sides by 2, but some people might not know what to do with that. So I'm actually going to take care of the fraction first and multiply the whole thing by 2. And what I get is 4n squared equals well, the 2's cancel out, so then it equals 9. Now I'm going to divide both sides by 4, and what you get is n squared equals 9 over 4. And now the last step is to take the square root. Remember, square root of a fraction, take it at the top and the bottom, and you get n equals plus minus 3 over 2. Now if you want to turn that into positive or negative 1 and 1/2, that's fine. Okay, the next one. If you try to take the square root of 128 or 162, it does not work out. They are not perfect squares. But if you look closely, they are both even numbers and can be divided by 2. And when you do that, you get n squared equals 64 over 81. And I have a feeling you know how to do that, so I'm going to let you finish that on your own. Last one. Okay, so I want to get the variable by itself, so I'm going to multiply the whole thing here by 4. Okay, and when I do, over on this side the 4's cancel out. I get a squared equals, and the other side, 4 times 25 is 100 over 121. Now, I'm going to let you finish this on your own. I will tell you that the fraction here is a perfect square on the top and the bottom. So that's, I think, 5 questions for you to try on your own to finish. If you at least try them, and I see the work that you tried them more than what I wrote down, for every person that tries it, I'll give you a point. For every person that gets all of them right, I will give you 2 points on your scoreboard. Alright? If you had any trouble, go back and rewatch the video. Good luck, and we will see you in math.